Hey, folks, it's time for the quote of the day, and today is going to be one that may trouble some folks. The man I'm quoting today was deeply, deeply depressed, and honestly, full of anxiety. And while I don't necessarily understand the anxiety part, his words, when you've been depressed, as I have been, his words they cut like a knife. Today we are quoting the Czechoslovakian writer and perhaps one of the most influential writers in modern history, Franz Kafka. Today is his birthday. Franz Kafka's life is what we're going to talk about today. I could spend some time talking about his work, but that could literally go on for hours and hours and hours, and I've only got 10 minutes. So I can't really talk about his work. It is impossible to really try to encapsulate what he wrote about because he wrote about a lot of things, but he always wrote about them from a position that was deeply, deeply not unsettling necessarily. I guess for some it would be, but deeply disturbed, deeply depressed. I mean, that's really the best word for it. A lot of his writing, some people consider it to be even psychologically horrifying. Some people, they look at books like The Metamorphosis, which is probably his most popular book, and they say this is really, really fucked up, and it is. But it's that way because his life was fucked up, and because that's what I know about him. I haven't read all of Franz Kafka's work. I don't know everything about everything he's ever written. I've read pieces and snippets, and I because of my depression I recognize where he's coming from, and it's like I don't want to touch too much of it because I'm afraid it might rub off on me. So I do try to keep my distance a little bit because, again, when you've been depressed, you try to stay away from things that are going to make you depressed. And without fail, Franz Kafka is going to make you feel depressed. And I'm going to give you a bunch of different things he's written here, and I want you to really think about them. I know that people are going to say, "Well, geez, that's horrible," or "Geez, that's have a different take on what they mean," but I think that everybody at some level, especially when you allow yourself to kind of look into those kind of darker points in your life and you don't, immediately jump away from them. If when you understand his life, which I can tell you about here in a minute, you start to understand why he would write things like people label themselves with all sorts of adjectives. I can only pronounce myself as nauseatingly miserable beyond repair. Same, dog. Same. He also wrote, I cannot make you understand. I cannot make anyone understand what is happening inside me. I cannot even explain it to myself. Now, these things that I'm reading you right now are from his journals or from letters that he's written to people, or, one or two of them are from Metamorphosis. But for the most part, I want you to understand through his words what was happening inside of him, who he was. A lot of people will hear about depression or think about depression and they don't really understand it. They don't even try to. But when you have somebody like Kafka who literally is describing how it feels in a visceral way, I'm telling you now, anybody that wants to know what it's like to be depressed, anybody that wants to know what goes on inside your mind, this is what goes on inside your mind. He's literally laying it out so that people can read it and try to understand it. And he's doing it in a way that he's using words that are easy to understand. It's allowing yourself to feel that. Now, I'm going to give you one more from this collection. Actually, I'll give you two more. He said, I usually solve problems by letting them devour me. Yeah. Yeah, this is a little longer, but I think that you'll get a real good idea of what it means to be depressed from this quote right here. This is a little longer, but just pay attention to what he says. He said, and this was in a letter that he wrote. He said, I have no memory for things. I have no memory for things I have learned, nor things I have read, nor things experienced or heard, neither for people nor events. I feel that I have experienced nothing, learned nothing. I actually know less than the average schoolboy, and that what I do know is superficial, and what every second question is beyond me. I'm incapable of thinking deliberately. My thoughts run into a wall. I can grasp the essence of things in isolation, but I am quite incapable of coherent, unbroken thinking. I can't even tell a story properly. In fact, I can scarcely talk. If you've ever wondered what yours truly's depression sounded like, that's what it sounded like. And I mean, it still carries on. I still feel that today. People don't understand that it actually affects the way that your brain works. And a lot of times, your ability to recall, your ability to grab onto things in the past, grab onto the way that you've, learned and experienced, it becomes harder and harder. You become distant and more distant as you become more numb. You don't have those emotional connections to who you were and how you've been and how you got there. And I think that this part of this, I don't want to make this the quote of the day because it's way too big and way too heavy, but I think that understanding what he said there is very, very, very key to understanding depression. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit about his life, and then we'll give you the quote of the day at the last thing. To understand how he got like this, you have to understand that he was born very frail and sickly. His father, this was his first son, had wanted a young strapping lad. His dad was a social climber, and even though he didn't really like he kind of was always an outcast, but he kind of bullied his way through it and became a social climber, became somebody that people looked up to, and so on and so forth. And he was very, very, you know, he cared about what other people thought. And so when his son was born, he was really proud of him for about 5 seconds, and then he saw that his son was sickly and was not going to be this, big strapping lad. So he started to hate him. Now, he loved him in the sense that it was his son, but that's it. As an individual, as a person, his father hated him. And this is something that carried throughout Franz Kafka's life, his entire life. His father and him basically grew to despise each other. His father embedded in him so much self-loathing, so much, so little confidence. So, I mean, he could not escape the oppressive negativity of his father. And he literally never escaped it, like never once in his life escaped it. And Franz Kafka's life is one where, you always think, well, there's going to be a point where there's some good things, but you literally can't find it. Literally every single point of Franz Kafka's life where he reached a point of maybe possibly being content, the bottom fell out of it. And sometimes it was his fault, but a lot of times it wasn't. And it just seems as if his entire life is an absolute constant downslide into tragedy. And that's just the truth. If you know anything about him, if you know anything about his life, you know that I'm telling the truth. So when he writes these things, when he goes in and he writes the horrifying tales of metamorphosis and things like that, it comes from a place of this darkness inside of him. Franz Kafka's writing literally changed the way that people saw the world, from Europe to South America and then into finally America well after his death. It's crazy when you think about how influential he was as a writer, how he really did kind of break down and describe and collect what it meant in the darkest parts of our souls, in the darkest parts of our beings. And yet in his life was, a couple people locally knew about him and his best friend, and that was it. Nobody really knew anything about him. Nobody cared. It wasn't until well after his death that his name caught fire, and now people know his name. So, all that in mind, let's get to the quote of the day. Franz Kafka once wrote in one of his notebooks, "We live in an age which is so possessed by demons that soon we shall only be able to do goodness and justice in the deepest secrecy, as if it were a crime." Think about that for a moment. Think about the world we live in. We live in an age which is so possessed by demons that soon we shall only be able to do goodness and justice in the deepest secrecy, as if it were a crime. I know that people have a hard time with stuff like that. People have a hard time with quotes like that because people want to be optimistic, but sometimes you need to see things for what they are, and sometimes seeing things for what they are through the lens of someone who is deeply depressed and full of anxiety is the truest form of reality. I don't believe in demons, but I believe in what Franz Kafka wrote here. Happy birthday to Franz Kafka, and to the rest of you. Take care of yourself. Take care of others. I'll talk to you soon.